Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast is your one-stop shop for fantasy football news and advice. Can't decide on who to draft on the first round? Going gaga on how to line up your team. Got you covered. Traditional leagues, dynasty league, PPR league, IDP league, even daily fantasy football league. Join us as we break down all the questions of fantasy football. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast.
All right, and welcome to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. This episode is brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network, and as always, I'm your host, Jesse Tapia. All right, so we know how last week's games went. Case Keenum, for those of you that picked up Stephon Diggs, actually, were probably very excited because of that touchdown he had at the end of the game. I think Diggs finished with around 134 yards, something like that. Had that miracle touchdown at the end of the game. Case Keenum had one touchdown, one interception. Tom Brady last week just went off, had over 330 yards, 3 touchdowns. Hopefully no one picked up Blake Bortles. I mean, he did have 214 yards for a touchdown, but that's not good enough. And then Nick Foles had over 230 yards, I believe it was, or near there, and completed 23 out of his 30 passes, so hopefully no one picked him up as their starting quarterback. As far as running backs go, hope you guys listen to me. As far as I was half right. I said that Leonard Fournette was my top running back of the weekend. He did have 3 touchdowns, 101 yards. I also said Derrick Henry was my number 2 ranked running back. I was extremely wrong about that. Hopefully you guys did listen to me, and hopefully you picked up my 3rd ranked running back and picked up Devontae Freeman. I'm sorry for lying to you guys about Le'Veon Bell. Said he wasn't going to do much. He did a lot. I think he had, 1 touchdown, but over 100 yards. Might have had 2 touchdowns. Can't remember exactly. Yeah, I think he did have 2 touchdowns in that game in the second half. So, I was wrong about Le'Veon. All right. As far as wide receivers go, I said Julio. Should have said Stephon Diggs, but I said Thielen. And then I think I picked Alshon Jeffrey too. Not too right about that. Wildcard weekend was probably the best weekend so far for me as far as talking fantasy. Last week got a lot of stuff wrong, but we're going to change it up this week. We're going to get a lot of stuff right. More just because we have more of a chance to get it right since there's only 4 teams left. So this show's going to be how it has been the last few weeks. We're going to talk about each game, make some picks. We're also going to talk about fantasy implications, fantasy outlook, which players could do well, which players won't do well. All right, I'm going to give my opinions on that. So we're going to do that for the first 2 segments. We'll start off with the Eagles and Vikings for the first segment. Then we're going to do the Patriots and Jags for the second one. All right, so then you're thinking, what? We only have 2 segments today? No, we do not. We have 4 still. We'll be talking about the fantasy surprises, disappointments, just pretty much recapping the year in fantasy football. All right, in that 3rd segment, and then in the last segment, we're going to talk about players who could do well next season in fantasy football, people who could break out, just pretty much a fantasy football outlook preview, a way too early preview, mind you, because we're going to be talking about players going forward and stuff like that more as the season dwindles down. So we'll be talking about the future a whole lot more, but as of right now, these are my way too early thoughts on fantasy football players next season in the 4th segment, like I said. All right, so let's start off with the Philadelphia Eagles and Minnesota Vikings game. Like I said last week. All right, let me give a rundown of each team how they did last week. All right. Let's start off with the Vikings first. We can talk about that crazy game a little bit. I mean, there's no one that could have expected that to happen. No one who thought that would have happened. I mean, really Stephon Diggs, last play of the game, Marcus Williams, poor guy, but man, for that to happen to the Vikings at home, just seeing all the reactions and stuff like that from fans was pretty cool. But let's talk how they did last week as far as stats go. All right, Case Keenum, he had 318 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Not the best numbers, but those are, I guess you could say, those are pretty consistent with what Case Keenum has done so far this season. Tavius Murray, he had 50 yards rushing and a touchdown. Jerick McKinnon had 34 yards rushing and a touchdown. I mean, Murray didn't really do much receiving. He had 2 catches for 17 yards, and McKinnon had 3 catches for 6 yards. So, I mean, as far as McKinnon goes, if you were playing in a PPR daily fantasy league, then, I mean, those were 3 receptions. That's about half-point PPR, usually, at least I think. So that's, 1.5 points right there. So, yeah, that was good for McKinnon, I guess you could say. But other than that, I mean, you had Stephon Diggs with 6 receptions for 137 yards, 1 touchdown. Adam Thielen had 6 receptions for 74 yards. Now let's look at the Eagles last week. The Eagles last week, I mean, they didn't, on offense, they really didn't deliver in fantasy. LeGarrette Blount had the only touchdown, but, I mean, he didn't really do much as far as running the ball. I think let me see if I got it right here. I got it right here. All right, LeGarrette Blount, yeah, he only had 9 carries in that game, 19 yards, touchdown, not too good. JJ had 54 yards rushing, also had 44 yards receiving, 3 catches, so that's about what? Let's do some quick math, about 9.8 points, 1.5, so about a little over 10 points if you played in a PPR league. Then Alshon Jeffrey, I mean, only 4 catches for 61 yards. Zach Ertz, only 3 catches for 32 yards. And like I said, Nick Foles, 246 yards, no touchdowns, no picks. All right, so that's how those teams did last week as far as fantasy, those players, I should say. Expect a lot of that this week. Okay, this isn't going to be... I mean, it's going to be tough, honestly. It's going to be tough this week as far as playing daily fantasy because this is a big defensive weekend, I feel. All right, because you got the Vikings, great defense, Eagles, great defense, and looking ahead to the AFC, like I said, we'll be talking about that in the next segment, but you got a great defense there. All right, Patriots probably have the worst defense out of the 4, but I mean, the Patriots really don't give up too many points on defense, so that's pretty solid there. Okay, so now let's talk game Sunday, Vikings, Eagles in Philly. All right, so let's start off with the Eagles. Nick Foles, don't expect him to even throw for 240 yards like he did against the Falcons. Nick Foles might go for a couple of interceptions in this game, honestly. All right, Nick Foles has been serviceable since Philly's had to start him. All right, I mean, his performance last week would have been even better if he would have capped it off with a touchdown or 2. Probably would have been the best, besides Tom Brady, the best fantasy. Ben Roethlisberger. We might have to talk about other players who played well last week because Ben Roethlisberger went off for over 400 yards, 5 touchdowns, crazy. But nonetheless, yeah, Nick Foles, I really don't like him going this week. Xavier Rhodes is going to probably have a good game playing against Alshon Jeffrey. Those linebackers are going to play well, I think. Nick Foles, if you're playing him, you got to hope that, I mean, he gets him down to the red zone and ends up getting a touchdown because he's not going to be throwing the ball deep at all. I mean, actually, this game he might have to, though. So, I mean, there is some upside there. But, I mean, do you really trust Nick Foles as far as that goes? I mean, against this defense. Last week against the Falcons, the Philly coaching staff did well to drop a game plan to where, you know what, Nick Foles' throws were all short. They were all underneath routes. All right, some running back screens. And like I said, that's why he was so successful as far as completing the ball. All right, he had 23 completions out of 30 attempts. Like I said, 242 yards, I believe. All right, so Nick Foles this week, I don't really trust him, wouldn't play him. Okay, let's talk J.J. Had nearly 100 yards, no touchdowns. 100 yards all-purpose, meaning, I think he had, 44 yards, I said, receiving, 54 yards rushing. Against this Vikings defense, this is going to be a low-scoring game, I feel, honestly. Like, I don't feel good as far as fantasy football for this game. All right, J.J. probably going to have around the same numbers. All right, might be a little bit more involved also because, like I said, it's going to be a lot of underneath throws for Nick Foles, a lot of running back screens. J.J. does well as far as when he's in space to get around players, to get by players, all right? That's why he did so well he only had 3 catches. Yeah, only 3 catches, but did manage to get 44 yards out of that. All right, ran the ball 15 times, got the ball a bunch in the first half. Probably going to see some more of that. I mean, Philly really can't get away from this game plan. They have to do that for Nick Foles in order to have the best chance to win. So, I mean, J.J., as far as PPR, and just as far as him running the ball, I mean, I think J.J. could be a safe play this week, but it's going to be difficult against that Vikings defense. LeGarrette Blount, like I said, he did have a touchdown last week, only 19 yards rushing, only 9 carries. LeGarrette Blount is going to get those goal line carries. So, I mean, the only way you pick up LeGarrette Blount is if you feel Philly's going to get to the goal line a bunch of times and LeGarrette Blount's going to get into the end zone about twice probably, all right? Other than that, I mean, there's no real upside to LeGarrette Blount as far as catching the ball, as far as picking up yards on the ground, because obviously J.J. is going to be the lead back. And LeGarrette Blount, like I said, is only going to be coming in on the goal line. So, I mean, I'm staying away from LeGarrette Blount this week, but J.J. might be a nice little safe play. All right, let's talk receivers. Alshon Jeffrey, Zach Ertz. Again, Torrey Smith, Nelson Aguilar, don't trust them. Alshon Jeffrey against Xavier Rhodes, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough for him. All right, last week he only had 4 catches for 61 yards. Probably going to be a little bit worse than that this week. All right, Xavier Rhodes and Desmond Trufant, both pretty good cornerbacks. I mean, actually, you know what? Alshon Jeffrey's probably going to have around the same yardage and catches this week, but I don't expect him to get in the end zone. Like I said, I think it's going to be a real low-scoring game. As for Zach Ertz, he did disappoint last week. Only 3 catches, 32 yards. Atlanta did well to take him out of their game plan, all right? I'm probably going to stay away from Jeffrey and Ertz. I mean, there's no solid tight end out of these 4 teams that could have a big game, you know? Rob Gronkowski probably is going to be the go-to, but like I said, I mean, I can't talk about Rob Gronkowski. I got to talk about the next segment. All right, so Zach Ertz, I mean, this week really, like I said, last week didn't play well. Only 3 catches, 32 yards. This week, probably going to be some of the same. Don't think he's going to go for anything too crazy or too big. So, I mean, as of right now on Philly's offense, I'm just going J.J. if I have to. All right, let's talk Vikings offense. Case Keenum, 18 yards, I think, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. This week against Philly, I mean, Philly's got a solid defense. Probably a top 10 defense, maybe top 5 if I had to think about it. Goes Jacksonville. I'm talking about everyone too. Jacksonville, Minnesota, the Rams, I guess you could say the Falcons. Does Phillies go there? Possibly. All right, so yeah, probably a top 5 defense. But like I said, for Case Keenum, if you need someone to play it safe and you want to go spend your money, your budgeting on other big players, then Case Keenum's the way to go. I think he's going to throw for at least a touchdown, I feel. Probably going to get around 250 yards, maybe 300 again. There's that upside to where he possibly could throw for 2, but I think it's probably going to be 1. I don't think he's going to throw an interception in this game. I think he's going to be better than last week, but not much of a fantasy difference, you know? So, yeah, that's what I think about Case Keenum. I mean, like I said, if you want to play it safe, pick him up and go big for the other players, then do that. But other than that, I mean, there's another quarterback that I'm going to be talking about in the next segment that you're probably going to have to go with. Actually, you know what? Case Keenum might be the best option this week. So, like I said, we got to talk about the other game next up. But as far as Case Keenum goes right now, he's probably the safest option at quarterback. All right, let's talk running backs. Latavius Murray, Jerick McKinnon. Both had touchdowns. Both didn't go for too many yards, though, rushing the ball. Against the Eagles got a nice little front 7. It's probably going to be more of the same for McKinnon and Murray. I mean, not too many yards. Just got to hope that they score a touchdown. I really don't trust them too much as far as it goes, but I mean, you really don't have too many options now with these only 2 games going on, all right? So right now we talked about Latavius Murray, Jerick McKinnon, J.J., and LeGarrette Blount. Obviously, out of those 4, J.J. is the better option, and then you probably got to go with Latavius Murray as the second best option right there because he gets more carries than Jerick McKinnon. So, I mean, really expect more of the same from them this week. As far as the receivers go, Adam Thielen did well, I guess you could say, for a PPR league. Had 6 catches, 74 yards. It's about 10 points right there if you're playing half-point PPR. This week, Philly's secondary it's still pretty good, but it's not as good as Atlanta's. So I think this week, Adam Thielen is going to play better than what he did last week. So Adam Thielen could be a safe option this week. Stephon Diggs is going to be juiced up after that touchdown he scored last week. I think Stephon Diggs is going to have another big game this week, okay? Kyle Rudolph might be the second best option from out of the 4 tight ends that I'm going to be talking about. So, I mean, if you're looking, if I had to pick between Ertz and Rudolph, I'm going Rudolph, all right? So that's what I think about those offensive players. As far as the defenses go, Phillies, I don't think they're going to cause too many turnovers against Minnesota and Minnesota's defense. I think that might be a good play this week because I think Nick Foles could go for a couple of interceptions because, like I said, Minnesota's defense is better than Atlanta's. But that's how I feel about those games, okay? Right now, I'm leaning towards Minnesota making my pick. Yeah, I'm going to go with Minnesota this week. All right. I think they're the better team overall, and I think they have a better offense overall. These teams are very alike, but like I said, it's just a better all-around team for Minnesota. So that's going to wrap it up for this segment. Next up, we're going to be talking Jags-Pats, and then like I said later on, we'll be talking about surprises, disappointments, great players this year in fantasy, like a little fantasy football 2017 recap in the third segment, and then for the fourth, we'll be talking about players who could break out, top players, just pretty much all that good stuff, like a preview. All right, so stay tuned, and we'll be right back.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Back to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. All right, last segment we talked about the Eagles and Vikings game. Made my pick for that. Talked about how each player could do as far as fantasy football goes, because you know what we do on this fantasy football show? Yeah, we talk fantasy football. All right, it's pretty simple. All right, so yeah, talked about Case Keenum, Nick Foles. If I had to pick between one of those two, I'm going Case Keenum. Nick Foles is probably going to have a bad day, I feel, against that Minnesota Vikings defense. All right. As far as running backs go, I mean, there's not too much upside as far as the four that I talked about. Talked about J.H.I., talked about LeGarrette Blount, talked about Latavius Murray, and we talked about Jerick McKinnon. All right, if I had to pick two out of those four, I'm going with Ajayi and going with Latavius Murray. All right, and then we talked about receivers. Talked about Jeffrey, talked about Ertz, talked about Diggs, talked about Thielen, and talked about Rudolph. Tight ends go. I'm going Rudolph over Ertz this week. Think Ertz is going to have about the same game he did last week. Not that good. All right, and then Thielen and Stephon Diggs are, you could really play both of them over Alshon Jeffrey, or pick both of them instead of going with Jeffrey and one of the Minnesota receivers, and I think you'd be fine. So that's how I feel about that. As far as defenses go, I think I'm staying away from Phillies because Case Keenum and them, they don't really turn the ball over too much, and I think Minnesota's defense is going to play well against Nick Foles. I think they're going to get Nick Foles to turn the ball over a bit, since I think they're going to game plan and take the underneath routes away, force him to throw the ball deep. All right, those are just my 2 cents about last segment. That's what we do. We recap. All right, this segment, we're talking Jags. We're talking Pats. Patriots. All right, who do we want to start off with first? This is probably the most intriguing game right here. Because you know what? I've been talking about it on the GSMC Sports Podcast and the GSMC Football Podcast. I've been talking about how everyone's ready to pretty much crown the Patriots as champs, already ready to crown them as AFC champions. All right, as if they don't have a game this week against the Jacksonville Jaguars, against the number 1 defense in the league. All right? I haven't liked it. It's been pretty frustrating seeing it. All right? People need to start using real analysis instead of doing quarterback versus quarterback, because that's not what it is. That's what the NBA does, all right? NBA will do LeBron James versus whoever they're playing, all right? That's how they do it over there. That's not how we should do it over here in the football side of things, okay? So you know what? Let's talk game. Let's talk Jags. Let's talk Pats. Let's talk Jaguars first. All right, let's start off with the Jags offense, okay? So, you got Blake Bortles. Last week, 214 yards, 1 touchdown. Actually, yeah, let me do the same thing I did for the last segment, go over the stats from each of the games. All right, so like I said, Blake Bortles, he was Blake Bortles. He was average. All right, I said in order for the Jaguars to beat the Steelers last week, Blake Bortles needed to be average, and he was exactly that. So like I said, he had 214 yards and a touchdown. Leonard Fournette went off for a big game. If he didn't get hurt for that little period of time he was out, probably would have ran for over 130 yards, honestly. All right, but he came back in the second half. He had 25 carries, 109 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Big game from Leonard Fournette. I got that one right for sure right there. I said last week, play Leonard Fournette. If you played him, you did well. All right, it's 18 points just off of touchdowns. Then you add 10 points just off of receiving yards too right there. So it's about 28 points from him. Then he did have 10 points or 10 yards receiving. It's about a point extra. And then if he played PPR half point, that's a point right there because he had 2 receptions. All right, so about 30 points from Leonard Fournette last week if you started him in a PPR daily fantasy league. All right, TJ Yeldon. He was the leading receiver for Jacksonville. He had 3 receptions for 57 yards. Also had 5 carries for 20 yards. So that's about a point and a half. It's about 7.2 right there receiving. Then add the 20 from his rushing numbers, from his rushing yards. That's about 9.2. Am I doing math right? I think I am. 9.2. And then you add the touchdown. It's about 15 points right there, right, from TJ Yeldon. Good game from him. Played well. I think he's going to end up being the leading receiver again for Jacksonville just because you can't force Blake Bortles to throw deep. And I think he's just going to get in the game plan a whole lot more because TJ Yeldon played extremely well last week, all right? Marquise Lee didn't do too much, only 3 catches, 28 yards. Allen Hurns only a catch for 12. D.D. Westbrook only 1 catch for 8. Their fullback, Tommy Bohannon, that's quite a name right there. He had a catch for 14 yards and a touchdown. Keelan Cole only had 1 catch for 45 yards. As far as the Jaguars receivers go, I don't really think they're going to do... I'm not sure because the Patriots secondary is kind of suspect. All right, they're not... Like I said, they don't give up too many points, but they do give up yards. All right, so you actually might see Blake Bortles throw for more than 214 yards, and you might see these receivers... I don't know. I can't trust them, dude. Especially against the Steelers' bad secondary last week. I mean, Steelers gave up 45 points. The receivers and Blake Bortles only accounted for 7 of those points. And you can't even see the receivers because the fullback caught the touchdown. All right, so I mean, I'd say you can't trust them again this week. All right, because if I had to take a defense, I'm taking the Patriots defense over the Steelers. And if I had to take corners, I'm taking the Patriots suspect corners over the Steelers corners because I know what I'm getting with the Steelers corners. And I know what they are. And I feel like the Patriots corners are better than them, honestly. All right, so that's how I feel about Jacksonville on offense right there. Again, like I said, I mean, I haven't even talked about the game. I just did recaps. Excuse me for that. So let's talk Leonard Fournette against the Patriots defense, against their front 7. Patriots defense last week had 8 sacks. I think that more had to do more with the fact that Tennessee has a weak offensive line. I don't see that happening this week, all right? Jacksonville has a better offensive line than Tennessee, and you know what? They have a better running back than Tennessee. All right, I think Leonard Fournette he's not going to be as good as last week. He's not scoring 3 touchdowns. Bill Belichick's just not going to let that happen. All right? You know what? As far as this game goes, Blake Bortles might be a little sneaky play right here, all right? Because you know, Bill Belichick knows that we all know that this offense goes through Leonard Fournette. He's the key. All right, he's obviously going to have to try. He's obviously going to game plan for stopping Fournette. He's going to try and force Bortles to beat him. Okay, so you know what? This week, Blake Bortles, like I said, might be a sneaky play right here. He might go off for a good game if he's able to play like a normal quarterback. Okay, so that's where you might see a guy like Marquise Lee play better. I still said that TJ Yeldon was going to be the leading receiver this week. I still believe that. I think he's going to play well. But like I said, I mean, Leonard Fournette this week against the Patriots, I'm not sure how much fantasy value there is this week because Bill Belichick knows how to game plan. Like I said, Bill Belichick is obviously, there's no doubt in my mind that Belichick's going to be game planning for Fournette. All right? It would be idiotic for him to try and game plan against Bortles. Take away Fournette, force Bortles to beat you. So that's why I said Bortles might be the guy this week. All right? If I had to choose between Foles, Bortles, and Keenum, I'm going Keenum. All right? So that's how I feel about the Jaguars offense. Now let's talk Patriots offense. Let's start off with the quarterback as we always do. Tom Brady. You know what he did? He missed practice today, which is Thursday, with a hand injury. I'm not sure if it's Tom Brady and Bill Belichick just saying, you know what, not even worth it to practice or whatever. Sit this one out. Let the hand, if it's jammed or whatever it is, just rest it, you know? I don't even know. Do you rest the hand? Is that what it's a hand? That's kind of weird to say. Like rest your hand. I don't know. But either way, Brady missed practice today. All right, he's got 2 more days to get that hand 100% until Sunday. All right. No one's really talking about it, but I think this might be kind of a big deal, maybe. Possibly. I mean, the guy's missing practice on a Thursday. Friday's usually walkthrough, and Saturday, I think, is a just game planning and all that, all right? So, I mean, he missed, like, the last real practice. Again, it's Tom Brady, so he doesn't really need to practice, but I feel like this could possibly be a factor. Against Jacksonville's defense, all right? Tom Brady, if you've noticed over the last, he's played 17 years, I feel. So yeah, with like the last 17, 16 years, one of those. Tom Brady's biggest weakness has been pressure. All right, not that pressure of playing in a big game, that pressure of the defensive line being right in your face. All right, always struggled, just can't play well under it. I think that might be the case this week. Jacksonville has one of the best defensive lines in the league. You got Calais Campbell, Marcel Darius, and that other defensive end whose last name I can't pronounce. I think it's like Ogunie or something like that. All right? Those guys know how to get to the quarterback. Calais Campbell is probably going to win Defensive Player of the Year this year. All right? And like I said, Marcel Darius and that other defensive end are no pushovers. We know what Marcel Darius can do. All right? So this game for Tom Brady, as far as fantasy football stats go, that's not looking too good, honestly. All right, I'm not trusting Brady this week. I know I said that. Did I say that last week? No, I said you should start Tom Brady, I think. All right, yes, I said that. But this week, I'm not going Brady. He doesn't play with pressure in his face. It's going to be a lot of underneath stuff, or at least they're going to try to do that. And you know what? As far as the deep routes go, Jalen Ramsey, AJ Boye are going to take away Brandon Cooks and Danny Amendola. Okay, so yeah, if it's between Brady, it's between Brady, Foles, Keenum, and Bortles. I'm going Keenum this week as my quarterback. All right, I think you should too. All right, let's talk running backs. Again, I mean, as far as it's going to be a low-scoring game, just like the Vikings and Philly game. All right, it's not going to be fun. This is going to be a fun weekend if you like watching running backs and defenses play well. But as far as shootouts and stuff like that, you're not going to enjoy it. Me, I'm going to have a good time watching these games because I love defense and I love running the ball. All right, so let's talk Dion Lewis. Last week, what did he do? Let me pull up what he did. All right, I believe he pulled out a touchdown. James White really stole the show from Dion Lewis in this one. Okay, James White, I believe he had 2 touchdowns this week. Here, I got it right here. Let me give you the official stats since we're an official podcast. All right, so like I said, Tom Brady last week, 337 yards, 3 touchdowns. You already know how I feel he's going to do this week. Dion Lewis had 62 yards rushing. Did not score a touchdown last week. He had 62 yards rushing, but he did have 79 yards receiving and 9 receptions. So that's about 4.5 points from the receptions if you're playing half-point PPR. All right, it's about 14 points right there receiving total. And then you got the 62 yards. It's about 20 points just based off of yards and the catches, okay? Solid week from him last week in fantasy. James White, 4 carries, 11 yards, 1 touchdown. It's about 7 points right there. Receiving the ball, 4 catches. Throw 2 more points there. That's 9. 29 yards receiving. That's about 2.9. So what? That's about 11 points already, a little bit over, and another touchdown. So it's about 17 points. Did well. Okay. As for receiving, you had Danny Amendola with 11 receptions, 112 yards, no touchdowns. Good game from him as far as receiving in PPR goes. All right, Rob Gronkowski, I said that was a must start. He did well. 6 receptions, 81 yards, and a touchdown. I don't think there was a tight end who did better last week. Okay, I already told you Dion Lewis, Brandon Cooks, only 3 catches for 32 yards. Chris Hogan had 1 catch, 4 yards, 1 touchdown. All right, so now let's talk Patriots running backs and let's talk Patriots receivers. All right. Dion Lewis this week, not going to be a factor running the ball, I'll tell you that much. Tom Brady's going to have to win this game with his arm, okay? That's what it's going to come down to. Again, he's going to have to do it. I mean, last week he did have Dion Lewis who did well, over 60 yards, okay? But this week he's going to be limited. It's going to come down to Tom Brady. And I don't think, as far as fantasy football goes, like Tom Brady could have a normal, good football game. I don't think Tom Brady's going to have a good fantasy football game, okay? Voice cracked a little bit right there. Just disregard it. Every time my voice cracks or whatever, you know, I'm 21 years old, but the voice is going to crack from time to time. I talk a lot, as you've noticed on this podcast, okay? So yeah, Dion Lewis, James White, as far as running the ball, not good options. Dion Lewis, as far as catching the ball, I think is going to be a good option because the Patriots are going to have to throw underneath routes constantly. They're not going to be able to throw the ball deep to guys like Brandon Cooks, Danny Amendola, right? That's one thing right there. Let's go receivers real quick, okay? Danny Amendola, Brandon Cooks, do not play them. Do not. I don't trust them. Okay? Jalen Ramsey and AJ Boye. All right, last week AJ Boye didn't play the greatest, but he was going against the best receiver in the league. All right, Jalen Ramsey did well. AJ Boye had trouble going up against Antonio Brown. That's not going to be the case this week, all right? Danny Amendola, Brandon Cooks are like light years behind Antonio Brown as far as receiving goes, okay? So Amendola, Cooks, not that good of a play right here, okay? Now let's talk Rob Gronkowski real quick. I still trust Rob Gronkowski more than I trust Kyle Rudolph, okay? Rob Gronkowski, I think, could be limited, but, limited for him is just what he did last week, 81 yards and a touchdown. All right, so if you got to play a tight end, it's Rob Gronkowski again this week, but I think the Jags might have some solid game plan for him this week, so it's going to be kind of scary about it, but I think he's going to play well enough. All right, now going back to James White and Dion Lewis. Man, I wish that these fantasy leagues would let you insert them as a wide receiver because, like I said, running the ball, they're not going to play well, and you can only play about, I think, two running backs, possibly effects, depending on the league you're playing in. So, receiving the ball, I think Dion Lewis and James White could play well. All right, but I think that's the only area where they play well is as far as receiving the ball. All right, so that's what I got to say about the Patriots on offense. Now let's talk defenses. All right, we've talked about two of them so far, Vikings, Philly. Now let's talk Patriots. I'm not playing them this week. I don't think they do well creating turnovers. Jacksonville's, I think I would play them this week. If I had to pick between Minnesota's and Jacksonville's, though, I'm going Minnesota's because I feel that Philly's not going to put up too many points. The Patriots are capable with Tom Brady of putting up at least maybe 14 points there. I don't think Vikings are giving up more than 10 against the Eagles, okay? So like I said, Jacksonville, they could be good for a couple of turnovers, honestly, and a few sacks. That's where the upside is. But if you want to play it safe, you want a team who's not going to give up points and a team who could come up with a couple of turnovers and some sacks, Minnesota's is the way to go, okay? So let me rank them. Quarterbacks, I'm going Case Keenum, Tom Brady, Blake Bortles, Nick Foles. Running backs, Leonard Fournette, Jay Ajayi, Dion Lewis, Latavius Murray, James White, LeGarrette Blount, Jerick McKinnon. No, Jerick McKinnon, then LeGarrette Blount, okay? Receivers, Stephon Diggs, Adam Thielen, Alshon Jeffrey. After the Vikings receivers, I have no faith whatsoever in these other ones. Alshon at number 3, then, no, I'm not doing the Cooks or Amendola. I just think that Ramsey and Boya are going to shut him down. This is tough. Maybe Marquise Lee. I don't know. Receivers is tough. You're going to pretty much pick in your poison there. Tight ends, I'm going Gronk, Rudolph, Ertz, Mercedes Lewis. Kickers, Jake Elliott, Steven Gostkowski, Josh Lambo, Kai Forbath. But, you can go either way with those. I think all these kickers are going to have solid fantasy football games because these defenses are going to keep teams out the end zone. All right, and speaking of defense, I'm going Minnesota's, then Jacksonville's, then Philly's, then New England's. All right, definitely go with Minnesota's over Jacksonville's, but you're safe going with either one, I feel. All right, so that's all I got to say about that. We'll see how it goes. Hopefully I'm right more than I'm wrong this weekend. Last weekend wasn't a good one, but wild card weekend was. So hopefully I go 2 for 1 right now. All right, so that's going to wrap it up for this segment. Next up, we're going to be doing a little 2017 fantasy football recap. So stay tuned, and we'll be right back.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, and welcome back to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Last 2 segments, we pretty much spent them talking about the games. I did not make my pick for the Jaguars and Patriots game, and I'm not sure I want to make my pick, dude. I'm still on the fence about it. All right, I'm going to make a pick for it, but tomorrow I might change that on the GSMC Sports and GSMC Fantasy or Football Podcast, not Fantasy, the GSMC Football one. All right, so the pick I'm about to make here could change. All right, this is just where I'm at right now. And make sure you listen to those 2 podcasts, all right? I need the views, all right? I need you guys to listen. I need you guys to follow me, all right? But like I said, this is how I'm feeling right now about the Jags and Patriots game, but that could change tomorrow when I'm doing my GSMC sports and football podcast. All right. So I think I want to go. I was leaning Jacksonville all week, but now I'm starting to lean towards the New England Patriots. I'm going to stick with the Jags right now. I'm going to think more about it later on. So that could change tomorrow, but as of right now, I got the Jags, and like I said, for the Philly and Vikings game, I'm going Minnesota. Okay? So that's how it is right now. That could change tomorrow, like I said. You're just going to have to listen to those podcasts and find out. All right? You guys like how I did that little plug right there? Got to throw on those podcasts too. All right. So now we're going to talk about players who were disappointing in fantasy football, players who broke out, played well. Pretty much just an all-around fantasy football recap for 2017. We're going to talk about everything. Deshaun Watson, everything. To probably maybe rank some players. I know everyone loves rankings. All right. So let's get into it. The biggest player that disappointed me this season, like, just instantly comes into my head. The first player that comes into my head was Amari Cooper. All right. Last year he played well. And I'm sure for whoever drafted him this year, I'm sure everyone drafted him pretty early. I know for me, I drafted him in 2 leagues, picked him up in the second round both times. All right, for my drafts this season, one of them I didn't go with, only went with running back for like my first 7 picks. All right, I went receiver heavy. I think in the draft I came in second in the league I came in second. I took AJ Green. I took Cooper. I ended up taking Devontae Parker, Devontae Adams. Dalvin Cook was my number 1 pick for running back, and I picked up Greg Olsen too. All right, I think I picked up Greg Olsen. So those were like my first 6 picks. I don't know how many players I just named right there, but however many players those were my first picks for that, all right? Like I said, Amari Cooper just was really disappointing this season. He did have that 201-yard, 2-touchdown game against the Chiefs, but other than that, Amari Cooper just never really put it together. It was just honestly pretty frustrating to watch it. Because we all know Amari Cooper does have the ability to be a solid number 1 receiver on a team, okay? But I'm not sure if him just catching the ball was a mental thing or his hands just don't work the way ours do, okay? Because he just couldn't catch to save his life, right? Wasn't running his routes well, just couldn't get it going in any game. It was frustrating to see, all right? And Michael Crabtree was a beneficiary of that. But, it's like I said, probably Amari Cooper was the biggest fantasy disappointment this year for me, okay? Let's go division by division, see if we could pick out disappointments. Let's go Buffalo Bills. No one really expected them. Anyone on LaShawn McCoy played well. New England Patriots. Brandon Cooks. Boom. Another disappointment. All right. Brandon Cooks, when he was traded to the Patriots, it was like, oh, Brandon Cooks is going to play well. He's going to thrive in that offense. His speed with Brady. He's going to be one of the better fantasy football players this season. And wasn't the case. Was a fantasy football bust this year, all right? Was a bust. Didn't play well. Didn't do anything really. We got to start realizing with the Patriots offense, it doesn't matter who they get, what they've done, or how well they've done it. It doesn't matter because that's going to change. With the Patriots, you got to fall in line and do what they do. It doesn't matter what you do best, okay? So, with the Patriots, we shouldn't have been so naive, and we should have realized, you know what, Brandon Cooks, he's going to have to fit into that offense. They don't run deep ball anymore. Randy Moss, they don't run that Randy Moss offense, and my goodness, was that Randy Moss offense with Tom Brady the best ever. Literally, all Randy Moss had to do was just run a go route, streak, down the field. Brady throws it up, you already know what's going to happen that year, all right? It was incredible how they did it. All right, Randy Moss just, boom, comes down with it every single time. Man, that was probably the scariest year of me being a fan. I've never been more terrified of the Patriots that year. All right, but nonetheless, Brandon Cooks struggled, was a bust, okay? It wasn't like the fact that he just couldn't catch the ball like Amari Cooper. He just wasn't producing well at all. All right, let's head to the AFC North. Joe Flacco, you can't really, if you're picking Joe Flacco, you're just walking on eggshells there. There's no upside on the Ravens for fantasy football, I feel. Bengals, Andy Dalton, very disappointing. AJ Green was pretty good this season. He was kind of inconsistent, but when he played well, all right? Cleveland, you really shouldn't be touching Cleveland with a 10-foot pole as far as fantasy football unless Josh Gordon's out there. And Josh Gordon, I'm going to save him for next Next segment. Pittsburgh Steelers, everyone played well. Le'Veon Bell, one of the best running backs in fantasy football this season. Antonio Brown, the best receiver in fantasy football. Big Ben, played pretty well, was productive, all right? Juju Smith-Schuster, that was a breakout player. Not breakout. I got to save Juju Smith-Schuster for next segment. Houston Texans. DeAndre Hopkins, probably one of the best fantasy receivers, right behind Antonio Brown as far as fantasy football. Now this is where we talk about Deshaun Watson. Sadness grows over the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast, as that name is said. All right. That was so bad. Deshaun Watson was lighting everyone up. Okay? The Seahawks. Okay, that's the only team I can name off the top of my head from his big games. But Deshaun Watson was on the path to fantasy greatness before he blew out his knee. He blew out his knee in practice. Practice. Not a game. Practice. Shout out to Allen Iverson. All right? He was going to be probably the best. He was already the best fantasy football quarterback when he was out there. I think he was ranked number 1 in the ESPN fantasy leagues. All right? And he was just getting better too. And then, boom. Deshaun Watson. I remember I was doing the sports podcast, I think, when I got the notification. Deshaun Watson goes down in practice with a non-contact knee injury. MRI had to follow and all that stuff. And then you just knew non-contact knee injury. We know what that means. We all know what that means. All right. Yeah, so he blew out his knee. That was very disappointing. Very. But we're going to say some good things about him in the next segment. All right, so yeah, just one of the biggest disappointments was Deshaun Watson blowing out his knee. Not even Deshaun Watson playing poorly or anything like that. The disappointment was that he just got hurt. All right, so let's talk Indianapolis Colts. T.Y. Hilton, I guess you could say he was disappointed. He was more of like a second, third option receiver on your team if you had him this season. I'm sure most people picked him up to be like a high second option or low first option for your team. But no Andrew Luck, Jacoby Brissett, he was serviceable as far as fantasy football goes, just wasn't good enough. So T.Y. Hilton was a bit of a disappointment. All right, Andrew Luck, he's going to be more of a next segment type of guy, but that was a bit of a disappointment too that he never came back. I know one guy in my league took him with his third round pick, I think. Yeah, took him in the third round, and he's like, oh, Andrew Luck's going to come back. Nope, he's not. Jacksonville, any disappointments there? No. Allen Robinson got hurt, but you can't really control that. Tennessee, Marcus Mariota, probably. All right, so far I'm going Amari Cooper is my number 1 disappointment. Brandon Cooks number 2 right there. Marcus Mariota number 3. Guy threw 15 interceptions, couldn't get it going. I drafted him. I thought, Marcus Mariota is going to be the consistent, safe guy on my team because I went really wide receiver heavy. I was really top heavy with wide receivers, and I knew I was going to trade for running back with those wide receivers, and I did. Listen to this. Okay, before I got Antonio Brown, I had Michael Thomas, AJ Green, Jarvis Landry, Devontae Adams, and Michael Crabtree on the same team. Listen to that. That's wild. All right. No, actually, I didn't have AJ Green when I had Michael Crabtree and or when I had Jarvis Landry and Crabtree. All right. So for my fight, when I made a trade, gave up AJ Green, gave up AJ Green. This is what I love doing too, as far as trading. Whenever a guy's hot, all right, like a running back, pick him up. Okay, play him one big plays well, values up, values high. Because I had Wayne Gallman. Okay, Giants were struggling at running back, had Wayne Gallman. All right, puts up 12 points for me. I know there's one guy who needs a running back or needs a wide receiver desperately at number 1. All right. And Wayne Gallman looked like he was going to be the lead back for the Giants going forward, just based off of how those 2 games he played. All right. So I have AJ Green and Wayne Gallman. I end up switching that up for Jarvis Landry and Jordan Howard. And again, remember, I told you, Dalvin Cook was my best receiver, or my best running back. So I had Jordan Howard and Dalvin Cook. Dalvin Cook tears his knee. And I can't remember who my other receiver or my other running back was after that. But, yeah, sure enough, I flipped Michael Crabtree and Jarvis Landry for Antonio Brown. Pretty good trade, right? But, yeah, nonetheless, like I said, Marcus Mariota, extremely disappointing. Going back to Marcus Mariota. But, yeah, probably the third most disappointing player in fantasy football this season. DeMarco Murray, Derrick Henry just really couldn't get it going as far as fantasy football goes. Derrick Henry, I had him for a couple of weeks, but Mike Mularkey just really never let him take off with it. Okay, so let's see. Any other disappointments? AFC West, we talked about Amari Cooper. Broncos, they didn't have a quarterback, so you couldn't really depend on anyone there. Kansas City Chiefs had a lot of great players on offense. All right. Let's go NFC East. Dez Bryant, big disappointment right there. The guy just really didn't play well. I noticed how we turned the segment. I said I was going to do a recap, but we're just going to have to push off the recap and just do disappointments because that's pretty much what the whole segment's been. We're starting to run out of time. All right, but yeah, Dez Bryant, this segment's going to be disappointments, okay? So you know what? Next segment, we'll do the 2017 fantasy recap and we'll do a 2018 fantasy preview. Boom, that's what we do. We pivot, all right? We're always on the go. So Dez Bryant, huge disappointment. Just really hasn't been the same since Tony Romo left. And next year, I'm not even picking up Dez Bryant if I have the opportunity to. Disappointment from the New York Giants was the fact that Brandon Marshall and Odell Beckham Jr. got hurt. That's all it is there. Philly had a lot of good options right there on their team. Not too many disappointments. Washington, I guess you could say a guy like Josh Dotson was a disappointment, but he's a rookie, so you can't really knock him too much. Green Bay, Devontae Adams was huge this year with even Brett Hundley playing quarterback. Jordy Nelson, his best fantasy years are behind him, I'll tell you that. Randall Cobb is gone as far as fantasy football goes. So, Jordy Nelson was a disappointment. All right, Atlanta Falcons. Julio Jones wasn't much of a disappointment, but he was very inconsistent, I'll tell you that much. All right, Matt Ryan was a disappointment, just didn't put up those MVP numbers that he did last season. Okay, Carolina, Cam was off and on. There's really no... I guess you can say Greg Olsen was a disappointment. The guy was hurt for most of the year. New Orleans had a lot of upside as far as their offense goes in fantasy football. Tampa Bay, Jameis Winston, that whole team, huge disappointment in fantasy football. As far as the defense, Jameis Winston, Mike Evans, Deshaun Jackson, O.J. Howard, Doug Martin, all disappointments. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, one of the biggest disappointments too. NFC West, David Johnson getting hurt, but he was out week 1. Adrian Peterson was a fantasy disappointment. Larry Fitzgerald, consistent. The old man right there. Carson Palmer got hurt. He's retired now. LA Rams, pretty solid fantasy production out of that offense right there. San Francisco 49ers. That's going to be a team for the next segment. I'll tell you that much. You know why. Seattle Seahawks. Russell Wilson, one of the top fantasy football quarterbacks this season. Doug Baldwin was pretty consistent. Other than that, the running backs were disappointing, and every other receiver on that team was disappointing. Jimmy Graham was a solid option, I guess, as a tight end. Not too many yards, but did pick up a bunch of touchdowns. So, those are my disappointments for this season in fantasy football. Next up, we're going to be doing like a little 2017 fantasy recap, and we'll do a little 2018 fantasy football preview. All right, so stay tuned, and we'll be right back.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
All right, and welcome back to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Guys, do I have the most terrifying story to tell you? All right, so as we're doing as I do podcasts stuff like that, do I call myself a podcaster? Is that what people who do podcasts, is that what they're called, podcasters? All right, so every podcaster's worst nightmare is doing an episode and you're still working on it, and then you accidentally click X and it closes. That just happened to me. Thankfully, I know how to use the save button, so we're all good. Crisis averted, but man, my heart just dropped when I saw that. Terrifying. I just had to share it with you guys because you guys are my favorite. You guys listen to my show. All right, so let's do a little. I'm still almost freaking out about it. My heart is racing a little bit. I thought I lost the whole show. That was terrifying, but we're good. We got it all. All right, so let's do a little 2017 fantasy football recap. Should we do what was the year in fantasy football? What were the stories? Like I said, Deshaun Watson, brutal that he tore his ACL. Probably the saddest thing that happened to fantasy football owners and to Deshaun Watson. I mean, that guy's a great guy. All right, so this was the year of injuries. Honestly, I mean, Odell Beckham Jr. I gotta go division by division because there was big injuries everywhere. All right, I mean, you had Odell Beckham Jr., Brandon Marshall hurt, Carson Wentz blew out his knee later on in the year. All right, let's go. Aaron Rodgers, broken collarbone. Okay, Sam Bradford. I mean, if you had Sam Bradford, I mean, as your quarterback, it's kind of, but Sam Bradford got hurt. All right. Anyone on Carolina get hurt? No. New Orleans, really no. Arizona, Carson Palmer, broken arm. David Johnson got hurt week 1, out for the season. That's only 6 players, all right? San Francisco, they were a bad team. Seattle, no one really got hurt. Buffalo, Shady McCoy, LaShawn McCoy. Every year in fantasy football, he always has a couple of games that he misses or is injured, so he doesn't bring out the best, but nothing there. All right. New England Patriots, no. I mean, Josh McCown, he got hurt. He was a pretty solid fantasy quarterback this season. Okay, Ryan Tannehill blew his knee out in training camp. I mean, that's been a bit of a kind of a off and on fantasy quarterback right there. Let's see, Cincinnati Bengals, no. Cleveland, no. Pittsburgh, no one really got hurt there, I don't think. All right, Houston Texans, like I said, Deshaun Watson. All right, Indianapolis Colts, Andrew Luck was injured all year, tried coming back, shoulder wasn't feeling right. Tennessee Titans, no. Denver, no. Kansas City, no. Los Angeles, nah. Oakland, Derek Carr hurt his back, and that was pretty much the end of him when he came back after that. All right, so that's about 7, 8 major injuries right there that happened, that hurt. This was the year of the injury in fantasy football, and, man, it was brutal. Even in playoffs, week 1, your first round of your playoffs, if you had Alvin Kamara, I think it was week 15 or week 14, he missed it. All right, so if you had Alvin Kamara, you probably lost because he was out. All right, so, I mean, this was just the year of the injury. I mean, I hope next year's better, but, man, the injuries just really hampered fantasy football this season, kind of diluted the NFL games this year. I mean, like I said, you're going to have a bunch of guys coming back off of injury next year, and you got to hope that they're the same. I mean, Odell Beckham Jr., I think he broke his ankle, I think. Carson Wentz, ACL injury. I can't remember the David Johnson's injury because that was just week 1, so long ago. Was that, I think it was an Achilles injury. I think he tore his Achilles or his ACL, but it was one of those. He tore something, I think. So, yeah, David Johnson was like the saddest one. I know one guy in my fantasy football league, one of my best friends, I'll say that. All right. He had Aaron Rodgers. He had David Johnson. Who else? He had a bunch. He had like the injury bug team this year. Man, that was just poor guy for him. Did well, I mean, with what he was given, but like most of his top players that he drafted were just injured. All right. So yeah, it was the year of the injury. It was also the year of looking forward. Jimmy Garoppolo, I know he's going to be a high pick next year in next year's draft, and you got to look forward to Deshaun Watson. All right, and then Andrew Luck probably coming back. I mean, who else? Any breakout players this season? Alvin Kamara, Kareem Hunt, 2 of the biggest breakout players this season as far as running backs go. Probably already a top 10 running back. This was the year of the rookie running back in fantasy football too. Leonard Fournette, he was off and on with some injuries, Leonard Fournette, but he did produce when he was out there. Like I said, him, Kareem Hunt, Alvin Kamara, just huge right there. All right, if you had them. Okay, like I said, just the year of the rookie running back. Mark Ingram, Harry had his best year fantasy rise as a running back. The return of Todd Gurley in fantasy football. All right, remember his rookie year, played well, was a monster. Then Jeff Fisher coaches. All right, and if you haven't learned, I'm number 1 in the Jeff Fisher fan club. All right, it is what it is, but Todd Gurley was a huge disappointment last season. This season, probably the best running back in the league. I know one guy in our league the guy who won the league, he had Todd Gurley, Alvin Kamara, Mark Ingram, like literally just hit on all of his draft picks. Didn't have to make a move for any waiver players or anything like that this season. Literally hit on all of his draft picks. All right. Like I said, Mark Ingram had the best year of his career as far as fantasy football goes. Matt Stafford played well all season. Eli Manning, this was the downfall of him. Carson Wentz lighting everyone up. Let's see. Jay Ajayi was a disappointment this season. Just wasn't what he was last year. All right, when he was traded to Philly, everyone thought he was going to play better, but it's difficult for you to go to a different team midseason and try to play well. Kenyon Drake was a saving grace for some fantasy football players towards the end of the year, I feel. I mean, I had him. He helped me big time. Like I said, Matt Ryan was very disappointing. Cam Newton was very inconsistent. This was the year of injuries and inconsistency, all right? Drew Brees just wasn't the fantasy quarterback that he's been the last few seasons. Michael Thomas, top 3 receiver for me, was huge this year in fantasy. Was huge this year in the NFL as it is. Played really well. And like I said, now, we got to look forward. Now we got to see if Jared Goff, if he could take the next step and be a solid fantasy football quarterback. What is Jimmy Garoppolo going to do next year? We saw 6 games from him. Dude looked like a monster, all right? Jimmy Garoppolo might be a solid option. Then you're going to wonder what's going to happen to Seattle's offense. Russell Wilson should be good, but you still got Doug Baldwin, and they still got to fix up a bunch of other holes out there. All right, Tom Brady, is he going to be a top fantasy quarterback next season? He's getting older. His play started to dip. Le'Veon Bell, where's he going to end up next season? All right, that's one of the biggest things right there. Le'Veon Bell, he said if he gets franchised by the Steelers, he might not come back. He might just sit out the season or possibly retire. Like running backs, they're starting to make a comeback, but they're still kind of scarce in fantasy football. All right, so Le'Veon Bell, that's just one less guy out there, and now, the running backs need to be even more needed in fantasy football. Okay, let's see. Alex Collins, is he going to take the next step up? Next year he played well, was a nice little number 2, number 3 running back on your team. Deshaun Watson, he's coming back off of his ACL injury. Is he going to come back strong as ever, better than ever, or is the ACL injury going to hurt him next year? All right, then you got Andrew Luck coming back. When is he going to be healthy? Andrew Luck is just Andrew Luck is like Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi. If you haven't seen The Last Jedi, you should have saw it already. Nonetheless, though, Andrew Luck is like the Last Jedi, all right? He's been out for what? Andrew Luck's been out for 2 years, okay? In the movie, Luke Skywalker's out, and they're still looking for him. They end up finding him and stuff like that. Again, if I'm ruining the movie for you, I'm sorry. You should have watched it. All right, it's been out for what? About a month and a half or so? It's been out since December. Yeah, you should have saw it already, all right? So, yeah, like I said, Luke Skywalker's been away from the Jedi, all that. No one really knows too much about him anymore. He's forgotten. That's exactly what Andrew Luck is, okay? When Luke Skywalker comes back, obviously he doesn't come back. He's like a little manpower the Jedi have, all right? But you realize he's the real deal. He's probably the best, all right? Andrew Luck coming back next year at 100%. We're going to realize that, we forgot about Andrew Luck, but he's Luke Skywalker, all right? Aaron Rodgers, he missed this year. He's going to be back next season. All right, now we're going to see what guys like Mitch Trubisky, if they're going to be able to up their fantasy value with coaches like Matt Nagy and Mark Helfrich running that offense. Jordan Howard, I think he's going to have another big year next year. All right, we're going to see what the Jacksonville Jaguars do. Are they going to pick up a quarterback? And if they do pick up a quarterback, how well is he going to play? And that's going to bump up the value for those receivers because the Jacksonville Jaguars, they have good receivers, just the quarterback holds them back, I feel. D.D. Westbrook is going to be a solid guy, a surprising guy next year, I feel. Look out for him. All right, look out for Marquise Lee again. One guy I've been pretty much waiting on, Jack Doyle, next year if Andrew Luck comes back. If Andrew Luck comes back next year, Jack Doyle is going to be a top 5 tight end in fantasy football. All right. Now we're going to see what Patrick Mahomes is going to do next season. It's all just coming down to it's like a lot of young players, how well they're going to do in their second year. All right, there's a lot of young players that played well this season. So that's one of the things that we got to look forward to the next year, all right? Didn't do a full preview or anything like that, just a little one, because you know what? We got to talk about more stuff because the fantasy football show isn't going anywhere after this season finishes up, all right? So we'll talk more about it. But that's going to wrap it up for this podcast. This was actually a fun one. I really enjoyed doing this one. But first segment, we talked about the Vikings and Eagles game. Second segment, we talked about the Patriots and Jags game. Talked about the fantasy upside outlook for those games right there. Talked about the most disappointing players in the third segment. And then for this one, we did a little what 2017 was the year of in fantasy football. It was the year of injury. It was the year of young players playing well. And next year, it's pretty much you got to look out for these young players again. So who's going to take the next step? So that's going to wrap it up for today's podcast. Thanks for listening to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Jesse Tapia, as always. We'll be back every Thursday. We're not going anywhere. Don't worry about that, all right? Like I said, stay tuned for next Thursday. Thanks for listening. Like I said, as always, stay tuned, and we'll talk to you later.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.